high from the experience of being on the road with Chameleons that we just kind of immediately were over in this corner over here playing guitar, smoking weed because it was legal. That was one big change of coming home, is you can legally just go into a store and buy weed. Smoking a ton of weed, and then like us and, you know, Owen, Brian, you know, Max, as he would come through from time to time, or just to a drum machine, would just start playing these like kind of way busier riffs, way more like, not psychedelic, but way more like Stone Roses, Cocteau Twins, swirling guitar stuff, but still like not like really totally like far removed from what we would have done before. We just started demoing, and like pretty soon there's just an album's worth of demos, you know.
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of I don't know, just like it feels like songwriting wise, and like there's just like a complexity to a lot of the new stuff that like that wasn't there on An Open Door, wasn't there on Heresy, and like didn't make sense for those records, but like the songwriting has become more like parts are weaving together, and
or just like something will stop and go into something completely different out of nowhere, which I think we experimented. Like, I think the song Heresy is kind of an experiment of that, but I feel like this album, like An Open Door has a simplicity to it that is totally by accident. Like, if there's not a lot of cymbals, it's because like we weren't like thinking about it right at that second. It didn't, nothing was planned, and this is the exact opposite. I feel like it returns to like the core foundation is way more of like what we were doing on An Open Door than what Heresy is, but it's definitely with like a lot of new influences and a lot of nitpicking. I met Conrad because he played in a band called The Fugue, and I played in a band called Night Wounds, and we both were kind of like idolizing the same world of like Flipper and Teenage Jesus and the Jerks and just gross music in general. And after touring and going and crossing paths in many different ways, it seems like sonically we both ended up in the same realm. I was doing Pleasure Grave, he was doing Warm Hands. It was both like sad pop music, really, which is what I've always considered both like Pleasure Grave and Soft Kill to be too. And I mean, we got along like the Feud, when we would hang out with the Feud back in the day. It was like immediate chaos, getting banned from houses for like tagging the whole neighborhood and like fucking, like, you know, not stuff that I'm necessarily like unbelievably proud of at this moment, but just like, I have so many hilarious stories from this short period of time with us being on these little tours together that I've been on the exact opposite, where you team up with a band that you have a good rapport with on the internet, and it's an unbelievable nightmare for like 7 fucking days. And it was the opposite. So when he relocated to Portland, it was like, I felt like it would just be inevitable before we started playing music together.
Yeah, I was out here doing Warm Hands, and I mean, we talked from, like, you know, when Toby was in San Diego doing Pleasure Grave, and you know, we would see each other when Pleasure Grave came to town on a few different tours, and we hung out, and then Soft Kill came to town, and I don't know, it just always felt like we would eventually work together, and it kind of worked out after.
I think Carlos was the last person who played guitar.
Yeah.
Carlos is a lot younger, and was like the first. He was like great. We've had some, like, everybody that's been in this band has been somebody that was a dear friend of mine. Like, at least on the guitar players for sure, like for years beforehand, or in some way like leading up to them being in the band. Carlos, Maddie is somebody that hasn't been mentioned at all, but like Maddie Hunter from, he was in Meth Teeth, who were like a phenomenal band. He played bass at the drop of a hat. Like the day before we recorded an Open Door, we were like, you want to be in this band? Like, we're driving up to record an album. And he went into the studio and like learned the songs the night before, and like was an iconic part of that band, like of why it's so, the bass lines are like sound as cool as they do. Like I love what he contributed. But everybody, like, it was just like Carlos stepped out, he had to go run wild and do his thing. And there was nobody else that like we had already decided, we were like, obviously that should be Conrad at that point, like if he would be up for it. So, Pleasure Grave to Soft Kill. I was living in San Diego, and the relationship that brought me down there had ended. I ended up in a warehouse in Los Angeles with an old friend of mine named Justin Gradine, who played in a band called Mutators, who were my favorite band back at that time. We lived in this crazy warehouse in LA, and like immediately we're just planning like world takeover through drugs and alcohol abuse and putting on these shows in this warehouse with all these fucking ridiculous bands. And we were planning to keep Pleasure Grave going because just like that's really like the only place that my mind was at, like music. After I had like $26, like it was really the only thing that I had any investment in that I could still take with me when I got kicked out of my girlfriend's apartment. So in playing there, it quickly evolved into something different because there was just really, surprisingly in Los Angeles, nobody that we clicked with musically. And the band at this point had been slimmed down to myself and Justin Gradine, who had not played with Pleasure Grave prior. He had joined from me moving up into this warehouse. And this girl, Shiloh, who had played in Secret Tones, which was a project with her and her then husband, Ryan, that does Youth Code now. She started coming down and jamming with us and played synthesizer, and we started writing songs for a new Pleasure Grave album that quickly like were not anything like, we could just tell they weren't Pleasure Grave songs. And we chose the name Soft Kill. It's something Shiloh came up with. It was ignorable. We just wanted something that didn't really hold too much meaning to us, and was just simple to look at, and that's about it. on getting back to Portland, we reconnected with everybody who was kind of within like the revolving cast of like, you know, ex and current members. And Carlos Sandoval, who was in Love Interest and is part of the Mystery Club Collective that's Olympia in LA. You know, he joined back up on guitar. Our friend James Petra, who played synthesizer on the 707-inch, he started playing bass. Owen picked up the synth, and you know, Max, who's been with the band since after An Open Door was recorded, you know, got back on drums. We played a couple shows, and it was like it had never really stopped happening in the first place.
Picked it up. Hit the ground running, as they say.
Lyrics, those are usually, as a rule, written after the music. I definitely write to whatever the melody of the song is going to be. I always kind of put the melody first. With Heresy, all the lyrics were really inspired by the general mood of a couple of our close friends having passed away. Matty Rue, who played in Holy Kiss, and so many other bands. A friend of ours named Dominic, who was a key figure in some of my hardest, darkest times, but always like a figure of much support. Total, raw individual that was not censored for anybody, and I really appreciated that. He ended up taking his life out on 92nd, just like in the worst place that he had ever been. It just really shook my core, because I definitely was his main pillar of support at that time. So it was really hard not to take that personally. And those lyrics were just, you know, something that kind of had to be expressed for at least me personally to move on. And I know that at least that Maddie's passing was a very, very hard blow on Max as well, who played in the Walk of Shames with him a couple years ago. Owen knew Dominic enough to see that he was a sincere, like, beautiful individual. And, you know, the lyrics are maybe silly to, like, some people, but they're definitely an important part of our music, and something that, like, I at least try to put in, like, how I truly feel, no matter how, like, juvenile something probably comes across. Circle of Trees was kind of a mishmash. Like, I think at one point we released it saying that was like a second album but it was mostly based off of, I think, just insecurity about inactivity at that point. It was kind of like, we gotta have a new album, like, when in reality, all that it was is, I mean, Lost and Past Life are demos that I wrote right after An Open Door, and the rest of it is either songs that I personally am happy with, that Owen and I put together in a basement here in Portland, but there's a couple, Untitled and Vacant Home, which bother me, and they've only ever really bothered me because they're not actually Soft Kill songs.
Yeah, those are from a different project, yeah?
They're from a different project that we did for literally maybe a month in that time of after me getting out of jail and coming home, and we, prior to, obviously because Soft Kill's a Portland-based thing, we weren't out here, we're playing music under the name Die Young. We did a couple shows and recorded a few demos, and those two were just, I think we thought they were strong songs, but in reality, I really don't think that those are Soft Kill songs in any way, and it's always kind of bugged me, which is why it's remained a one-time pressing on cassette, and I think that both vinyl pressings that were supposed to happen, I'm kind of glad that they didn't happen almost.
Oh, I'm glad. I mean, all in all, if you're gonna spend the time and the money to do a vinyl pressing, I'd like to put my best foot forward as far as what the songs sound like, and at the end of the day, they are kind of demos.
Yeah, they're demos, and I don't think some of them even like I said, a couple of them I just don't think fit as Soft Kill songs. So for us, it's just a cassette that kind of documents a certain period of time, and one of those songs is gonna end up recorded on the next record. So it's not all lost, so to speak. No pun intended. When Owen and I returned to Portland, when we moved out there, we played a couple shows. We wrote a song called Grand View, and then essentially at that point, I took about a year break to get married and just, I guess, try to live an adult life in some sense, which is not always the norm in Portland. So, I mean, Heresy is I've written and recorded all of Blizzard Grave up until the Flashing EP that we did together. So and Soft Kill was collaborative in the sense of me and Shiloh and Justin Gradine to some degree too. He definitely, his drumming is what defined a few of my favorite songs that we did on An Open Door. But for the most part, I've written so much music alone that Heresy was more of a comfort zone of getting into that comfort zone of collaborating with people with this project, because in a lot of ways, regardless of bad blood and things that had happened with Shiloh, I felt I wanted to respect her past contributions by being pretty selective about who else was going to step in and create things. Just because I felt that original circle of herself and Justin Gradine and I is something that again, regardless of Bad Blood, I really have fond memories of being in a warehouse in LA and kind of putting together some of those songs. So Heresy for me was just coming out and being what else do you guys like? Let's try some other things. Let's see what we can create together. And Violent Mind was the first example of that, and it's probably my favorite song on that record without a doubt.
I think that was the first contributions that Conrad made artistically as well.
For sure.
And it was the first time we'd ever been in a room with him when he had a guitar. We immediately came up with something that was incredibly complimentary, but didn't it just fit in perfectly.